the psychology of empaths who love staying at home. Have you ever noticed how some people feel more alive the moment the world goes silent? No noise, no crowds, no forced conversations, no emotional chaos pouring into their nervous system, just peace. And if you're an empath, that peace is not laziness, it's survival. Because while most people think staying home means isolation, psychology says something completely different. For empaths, home becomes a psychological recovery chamber. Science has discovered that highly sensitive people process emotional stimulation far more deeply than average individuals. Their brains don't simply notice emotion, they absorb it. Every argument, every fake smile, every hidden tension, every emotionally unstable person. The empath nervous system records it all. Researchers studying sensory processing sensitivity found that emotionally sensitive individuals show stronger activation in brain regions connected to awareness, empathy, and emotional meaning. Which means an empath walking into a crowded room isn't just entering a building. They're entering hundreds of emotional frequencies at once. And most people never realize the cost of that. An empath can leave a 5-minute conversation feeling exhausted for hours. Not because they're weak, because their brain never stops scanning. Psychologists call this hypervigilant emotional processing. The brain constantly analyzes tone, facial expressions, micro behaviors, emotional shifts, tension patterns, and hidden intentions. And over time, that creates neurological fatigue. This is why many empaths secretly crave being home. Home is the only place where the nervous system finally unclenches. No emotional performance, no pretending, no emotional contamination, just regulation. But society misunderstands this completely. People call empaths antisocial, lazy, disconnected, too quiet. What they don't understand is this: empaths are not escaping people. They are escaping emotional overload. Because the human nervous system was never designed to absorb non-stop stimulation 24 hours a day. Yet modern life forces exactly that. Phones buzzing, crowded stores, constant notifications, endless conversations, emotional drama disguised as entertainment. And empaths absorb all of it more intensely than most people realize. Studies on overstimulation show that chronic sensory and emotional input increases cortisol production, the stress hormone connected to anxiety, fatigue, inflammation, poor sleep, and emotional burnout. For empaths, this effect becomes amplified. Their nervous systems stay on longer, which explains something fascinating psychologists discovered. Highly sensitive people often require significantly more recovery time after social interaction. That recovery usually happens at home. And this is where things become powerful. Because home is not simply a location for an empath, it becomes emotional armor. The lighting matters. The silence matters. The smell matters. The energy matters. Everything about the environment either heals the nervous system or attacks it. This is why many empaths unconsciously create calming rituals at home. Soft blankets. Most people think the empath who stays home is lazy, unmotivated, disconnected from reality. But psychology says something far darker is happening beneath the surface. Because what looks like staying home is often a nervous system trying to survive emotional overload. And the terrifying part? Most empaths don't even realize their body is silently collapsing under the weight of other people's emotions. Science has discovered that highly sensitive individuals process emotional information far more deeply than the average person. Their brains react stronger to facial expressions, emotional tone, social tension, and hidden emotional signals. Which means an empath doesn't simply walk into a room, they absorb it. Every fake smile, every hidden resentment, every anxious person, every emotionally unstable energy. The empath nervous system scans it all automatically. And over time, that constant emotional absorption becomes biologically exhausting. Researchers studying sensory processing sensitivity found that highly sensitive people show increased activity in brain regions connected to awareness, empathy, and emotional processing. In simple words, their brains never truly stop analyzing emotional danger. That constant scanning activates stress hormones inside the body. Cortisol rises. Adrenaline increases. The nervous system stays alert. And when this happens too often, the body begins behaving as if it's under attack, even when nothing dangerous is physically happening. This is why so many empaths feel exhausted after social interaction. Not tired, drained. There's a difference. Normal fatigue disappears after rest. Emotional overload attacks the nervous system itself. It creates headaches, digestive problems, muscle tension, brain fog, sleep disruption, chest tightness, anxiety, emotional numbness. And one of the most shocking discoveries in modern psychology is that emotional stress affects the body almost identically to physical danger. The brain cannot fully separate emotional threat from survival threat, which means toxic conversations can trigger the same stress responses as real emergencies. Now imagine living like that every day. Crowded stores, loud workplaces, constant notifications, emotionally unstable people, fake social interactions, pressure to perform happiness. The empath body absorbs all of it, silently, until home becomes the only place the nervous system can finally breathe. And this is the part most people misunderstand. Empaths do not stay home because they hate people. They stay home because the outside world overstimulates their biology. Psychologists call this overstimulation sensitivity. Too much emotional input forces the nervous system into survival mode. And survival mode changes everything. G inside the body. The heart rate increases. Inflammation rises. Sleep quality drops. Immune function weakens. Some studies even show chronic emotional stress can shrink areas of the brain connected to emotional regulation and memory. Think about that. The wrong environment can physically reshape the brain over time. And empaths feel this faster than most people because their emotional processing runs deeper. This is why an empath may come home after one exhausting interaction and immediately lock themselves in silence. No TV, no talking, no noise, just stillness. Because stillness becomes medicine. The nervous system is trying to reset itself before complete emotional burnout occurs. And many empaths instinctively create rituals that calm the body without even realizing why. Soft lighting, warm blankets, comfort food, music, cleaning, tea, long showers, sitting alone in silence. To outsiders, these habits look ordinary, but neurologically, they are recovery mechanisms. The brain is attempting to lower stress hormones and restore emotional balance. Even food starts playing a hidden psychological role. Most people eat based on cravings. Empaths often eat based on emotional exhaustion. And science supports this more than people realize. Foods rich in magnesium help relax the nervous system. Omega-3 fatty acids reduce inflammation connected to stress and anxiety. Warm carbohydrates increase serotonin production, temporarily calming emotional tension. This explains why emotionally overwhelmed people often crave comfort foods after stressful interactions. The body is searching for biochemical safety. But here's where things become heartbreaking. Many empaths spend years blaming themselves for their exhaustion. They think they're weak, too emotional, too sensitive, too different. When in reality, their nervous system has simply been overloaded for too long. And because society rewards constant stimulation, empaths often feel guilty for needing rest. But the body keeps sending warning signs anyway. Chronic fatigue, emotional detachment, social exhaustion, burnout, panic attacks, insomnia. The nervous system eventually forces what the mind tries to ignore. This is why some empaths suddenly disappear from social circles without explanation. It's not always depression. Sometimes it's emotional survival. The body finally reaches its limit. And the most dangerous part won. So that many empaths continue absorbing emotional chaos even inside their own homes, through social media, news, messages, phone calls, negative content. Because the empath brain does not fully distinguish between physical emotional exposure and digital emotional exposure. The nervous system still reacts, which means emotional exhaustion can happen without ever leaving the house. That's how powerful emotional absorption really is. And yet, something incredible happens when empaths finally learn to protect their energy. The body begins healing. Sleep improves. Breathing slows. Anxiety decreases. Focus returns. The immune system strengthens. Even inflammation levels inside the body may decrease once chronic stress is reduced. This is why peace feels almost addictive to empaths. Because for the first time in a long time, their nervous system feels safe, and safety changes the entire human body. Psychologists discovered that when people feel emotionally safe, the brain shifts out of survival mode and into restoration mode. Healing becomes easier. Creativity increases. Memory improves. Emotional regulation stabilizes. The body literally repairs itself differently when stress decreases. Which explains why many empaths become more creative, insightful, and emotionally intelligent in solitude. Away from emotional noise, the brain can finally hear its own thoughts. That silence becomes powerful, not empty. Powerful. Because the empath is no longer reacting to everyone else's emotions every second of the day. For once, they can reconnect with themselves. And maybe that's the real truth nobody talks about. The empath who stays home is not hiding from life. They are trying to recover from a world that constantly demands emotional labor from people who already feel too much. A world that celebrates noise while quietly destroying nervous systems. A world where sensitivity is mocked even though neuroscience proves it is real. And the empath eventually learns something life-changing. Peace is not laziness. Rest is not weakness. Silence is not failure. Sometimes staying home is the most intelligent thing a damaged nervous system can do. Because while the world keeps demanding more energy, the empath is simply trying to survive long enough to feel whole again. There are people walking through this world whose nervous systems feel everything more intensely than others. Not imaginary. Nation, not weakness. Science is beginning to confirm it. And if you are an empath, your body may have been carrying invisible stress your entire life without you even realizing it. Because while most people experience emotion, empaths absorb it. Like human antennas tuned to emotional frequencies nobody else notices. The tension in someone's voice. The sadness hidden behind a smile. The anxiety sitting silently across the room. The anger people try to suppress. An empath's nervous system detects it instantly. And the terrifying part is this happens automatically. Without permission. Without rest. Without an off switch. Researchers studying highly sensitive individuals discovered something shocking. Their brains process emotional and sensory information far more deeply than average people. Brain imaging studies showed increased activation in regions linked to empathy, awareness, emotional meaning, and social processing. Which means an empath entering a crowded room is not experiencing the same reality as everyone else. They are processing hundreds of emotional signals simultaneously. Most people can filter emotional background noise. Empaths struggle to. And over time, this creates neurological exhaustion most people will never understand. Because the human nervous system was never designed to stay emotionally alert 24 hours a day. Yet many empaths unknowingly do exactly that. Their brains constantly scan for emotional danger. Facial expressions. Voice changes. Energy shifts. Social tension. Hidden conflict. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, and hypervigilance slowly burns the body from the inside out. The brain stays trapped in survival mode. Stress hormones rise, adrenaline increases, muscles tighten, heart rate changes, sleep quality drops. Even digestion begins malfunctioning. That's why many empaths suffer from mysterious physical symptoms doctors struggle to explain. Fatigue, headaches, stomach pain, chest tightness, chronic anxiety, emotional numbness, because emotional stress does not stay in the mind. It enters the body. One study found that prolonged stress increases inflammation throughout the nervous system. Another linked chronic emotional stress to weakened immune response, meaning emotional overload can literally make people physically sick. Now imagine being biologically wired to absorb more emotional stimulation than the average. Every person, every single day. No wonder so many empaths feel exhausted around crowds, shopping malls, offices, family gatherings, busy streets, constant social interaction. The empath nervous system interprets all of it as nonstop input, and the brain becomes overwhelmed trying to process emotions that don't even belong to them. This is why empaths often feel strangely different from other people. Because while others recover quickly after social interaction, empaths may need hours or even days. Not because they're antisocial, because their nervous system absorbed too much information, and this overstimulation creates a hidden addiction to silence. Silence becomes medicine. The moment the noise disappears, the nervous system finally begins calming itself. Breathing slows, muscles relax, thoughts clear. Emotional static decreases. For many empaths, peace feels almost euphoric, because the body has been starving for regulation. And science shows something fascinating about this. Highly sensitive individuals often react more strongly not only to negative experiences, but also to positive healing environments, meaning calm spaces affect empaths more deeply too. Soft lighting, nature sound. Warm environments. Gentle music, comforting smells. These things don't just feel nice to an empath. They physiologically change the nervous system. Cortisol levels can decrease, blood pressure stabilizes, heart rhythms calm, the body finally exits survival mode. But modern life destroys this balance constantly. Phones never stop buzzing. Social media floods the brain with emotional information. Negative news cycles trigger fear responses. Artificial lighting disrupts sleep hormones, and empaths absorb all of it more intensely. Even emotional content online affects the nervous system, because the brain reacts to emotional imagery almost as if it were happening in real life. That means an empath scrolling through negativity for hours may unknowingly keep their body trapped in chronic stress mode. And chronic stress changes the brain over time. Research shows long-term stress exposure can affect memory, emotional regulation, concentration, and even physical aging. Think about that. Emotional overload can literally accelerate biological damage inside the body, which explains why some empaths suddenly isolate themselves after years of emotional burnout. The nervous system eventually. Why reaches a breaking point, and when that happens, the body forces rest, sometimes through exhaustion, sometimes through panic attacks, sometimes through emotional shutdown. The body always keeps score. But there's another side to this most people never see, because the same nervous system that overwhelms empaths also gives them extraordinary abilities. They notice details others miss. They sense danger early. They read emotions accurately. They understand people deeply. Studies on highly sensitive individuals found stronger awareness of subtle environmental and emotional changes. This makes many empaths exceptional listeners, creators, caregivers, writers, psychologists, artists, and healers. Because deep emotional processing creates deep perception, but only when the nervous system is healthy. When overstimulation becomes chronic, that gift turns into suffering. And this is why emotionally intelligent empaths become protective of their environment. They stop tolerating constant chaos. They become selective about who enters their life. Selective about conversations. Selective about relationships. Selective about energy. Because they finally realize something most people learn too late. Not every person deserves access to your nervous system. And once an empath understands this, their entire life begins changing. Their body softens, their mind quiets, their sleep improves, even their creativity returns, because the brain no longer wastes all its energy surviving emotional overload. Instead, it begins healing. This is why healthy routines matter so deeply for empaths. Sleep regulation, healthy food, nature exposure, exercise, hydration, quiet environments. These are not luxuries for sensitive people. They are nervous system protection. Even food plays a psychological role. Magnesium-rich foods help calm stress responses. Omega-3 fats support brain function and emotional regulation. Herbal teas can reduce physiological tension. Complex carbohydrates influence serotonin levels linked to mood stability. The body of an empath constantly reflects what the nervous system experiences. And maybe that's why so many empaths secretly crave home. Not because they hate life, but because home becomes the only place where their nervous system finally stops absorbing everyone else. A place where emotional noise disappears. A place where the body can finally repair itself. A place where the empath remembers what their own emotions actually feel like beneath the weight of everyone else's pain. Because after years of carrying invisible emotional pressure, peace stops feeling like comfort. It starts feeling like survival. there is a dangerous moment in the life of every empath that almost nobody sees happening. At first, solitude feels healing, peaceful, safe. The nervous system finally relaxes after years of emotional overload. The silence feels like medicine. No emotional chaos. No fake conversations. No draining energy. No pressure to perform happiness. For the first time in a long time, the empath can breathe. And psychologically, this makes perfect sense. Science has confirmed that overstimulation exhausts the nervous system, especially in highly sensitive individuals. The brain becomes flooded with emotional input. Stress hormones rise. Adrenaline increases. The body stays alert for too long. So when the empath finally escapes into solitude, the nervous system experiences relief. Heart rate slows. Muscles soften. Cortisol decreases. The body feels safe again. But this is where something dangerous quietly begins. Because healing, solitude, and emotional. Why isolation look almost identical in the beginning. Both involve silence. Both involve distance. Both involve being alone. But underneath the surface, they are completely different psychological realities. One restores the nervous system. The other slowly traps it. And many empaths don't realize the difference until years later. Healthy solitude helps a person reconnect with themselves. Unhealthy isolation slowly disconnects them from life itself. That distinction changes everything. Psychologists discovered that controlled solitude can improve emotional regulation, creativity, self-awareness, and nervous system recovery. But chronic social isolation creates entirely different effects inside the brain and body. Studies have linked prolonged isolation to increased anxiety, depression, inflammation, sleep disruption, cognitive decline, and even higher mortality rates. Some researchers found that long-term loneliness affects the body similarly to smoking multiple cigarettes a day. Think about that. Emotional isolation can physically damage the human body. And empaths are especially vulnerable because their nervous systems already associate people with emotional exhaustion. Over time, the brain begins creating dangerous associations. Crowds equal stress. Conversations equal fatigue. Relationships equal emotional pain. And once the brain learns these patterns, avoidance starts feeling safer than connection. That's when healing quietly transforms into fear. The empath stops going out, stops answering messages, stops trusting people, stops allowing emotional closeness. Not because they don't care, because the nervous system starts interpreting human connection as threat. This is how emotional survival slowly becomes emotional imprisonment. And the terrifying part is that isolation initially feels good. That's what makes it dangerous. The silence feels peaceful. The distance feels protective. The emptiness feels calm. But underneath that temporary relief, the brain is slowly rewiring itself around avoidance. Psychologists call this reinforcement behavior. The brain learns that avoiding stressful interaction reduces discomfort, so it rewards avoidance. And over time, the nervous system becomes even more sensitive to emotional stimulation because it loses tolerance for it. That's why some empaths eventually feel drained by even the smallest social interaction. A simple phone call feels overwhelming. A crowded room feels unbearable. Even healthy relationships begin feeling exhausting. Not because the empath is broken, because the nervous system has adapted too deeply to isolation. And biology plays a massive role in this process. Human beings are neurologically wired for connection. Oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and other brain chemicals depend heavily on healthy emotional interaction. Supportive human connection literally regulates the nervous system. It lowers stress hormones, improves immune response, stabilizes mood, increases lifespan. One Harvard study that tracked adult development for decades found something extraordinary. The quality of relationships predicted long-term happiness and health more strongly than money or fame. Connection heals the body. But for empaths, connection without boundaries destroys it. That's the paradox they spend their lives trying to solve. How do you stay emotionally open in a world that constantly drains sensitive people? And this is where emotionally mature empaths become different. They stop choosing between isolation and chaos. Instead, they learn selective connection. They stop giving everyone unlimited emotional access. Because one of the biggest psychological breakthroughs an empath can experience is realizing this. Protecting your energy is not the same as abandoning life. Healthy empaths learn boundaries, not walls. Walls block everyone. Boundaries filter wisely. And psychologically, boundaries are one of the strongest forms of nervous system protection ever studied. People with healthy emotional boundaries experience lower stress levels, better mental health, and more stable relationships. Why? Because the brain finally feels safe enough to engage without constant emotional threat. That safety changes everything. The empath no longer needs to disappear completely. They simply become intentional. Intentional with friendships. Intentional with environments. Intentional with conversations. Intentional with media. Intentional with time. Because mature empaths eventually realize that constant emotional exposure is not compassion. It is self-destruction. And once they stop trying to save everyone, something incredible happens. Their energy returns. Their nervous system softens. Their identity reappears. Because many empaths spend years absorbing other people's emotions so intensely that they lose connection with their own. That's why solitude feels so powerful at first. It gives them space to hear themselves again. But healing requires balance. Too much emotional exposure overwhelms the empath. Too much isolation slowly weakens the nervous system's ability to engage with life, and science supports this balance completely. Research shows that moderate positive social interaction improves emotional resilience, cognitive function, and stress recovery. The nervous system needs both restoration and healthy connection to remain balanced. Not endless stimulation. Not permanent withdrawal. Balance. And this is where home becomes important in a healthy way. Home should become a recovery space, not a hiding place, a place to reset, reflect, recharge, reconnect internally, but not disappear forever. Because isolation changes the brain slowly and quietly. The longer people isolate, the more unfamiliar connection begins feeling. The brain loses emotional flexibility. Fear increases. Anxiety rises. Confidence decreases. And eventually, loneliness itself starts damaging physical health. Inflammation increases. Sleep worsens. Stress hormones rise. The body begins suffering from emotional starvation, which is tragic because many empaths isolate themselves trying to avoid pain, only to create a different kind of pain entirely, the pain of disconnection. And maybe that's why the strongest empaths are not the ones who shut the world out completely. They are the ones who learn how to stay soft without being destroyed. The ones who learn that boundaries can protect sensitivity better than isolation ever could. The ones who stop absorbing every emotional storm around them. The ones who finally understand that not every broken person is their responsibility. Because once an empath learns selective peace instead of permanent withdrawal, life changes completely. Relationships become healthier. The nervous system becomes calmer. Connection stops feeling terrifying. And for the first time, the empath realizes something beautiful. They were never meant to disappear from the world. They were simply never taught how to exist in it without losing themselves.